It is a wonderful gray day, and on such days, reading some Nietzsche is perfect. So, let's begin. We have dug into so much of what he's had to say, and now we are in the section titled At Noon. Alright? So, we're going to continue, inshallah, upon that vein. It should be juicy. Let's begin. Bismillah. Thus I spoke once and seemed clever to myself, but it was blasphemy. That I have learned now clever fools speak better, precisely the least, the softest, lightest, a lizard's rustling, a breath, a breeze, a moment's glance. It is little that makes the best happiness. So it is little that makes the best happiness. And remember, he mentioned earlier how little is sufficient for happiness, and now he says again, it is little that makes the best happiness, and little and best are italicized for us, okay? So that means he puts emphasis on that. What happened to me? Listen, did time perhaps fly away? Do I not fall? Did I not fall? Listen, into the well of eternity. Now, the well of eternity, if you think about how some wells are quite deep and how narrow they are, so falling into that, with no way to climb out, could be pretty intense, right? And so if you're in the well of eternity, it's bottomless. Let's talk about anxiety inducing. What is happening to me? Still, I have been stung. Alas, in the heart, in the heart. Oh, break, break, heart. After such happiness, after such a sting. How? Did not the world become perfect just now, round and ripe? Assalamu alaikum, Shokta. Oh, the golden ring. Where may it fly? Shall I run after it? Quick, still. And here Zarathustra stretched and felt that he was asleep. Up, he said to himself, you sleeper, you noon napper. Well, get up, old legs. It is time and overtime. Many a good stretch of road still lies ahead of you. Now you have slept out how long? Half an eternity. Well, up with you now, my old heart. After such a sleep, how long will it take you to wake it off? But then he fell asleep again, and his soul spoke against him, and resisted, and lay down again. Leave me alone, still. Did not the world become perfect just now? Oh, the golden round ball. That kind of reminds me of the scepter that the kings and queens of England have. If you go and you look at these older images of monarchs, there's like a scepter with a ball on it. So this golden round ball, if you look at art of Pythagoras as well, you'll see him like a golden ball by him. Get up, said Zarathustra, you little thief, you lazy little thief of time. What? Still stretching, yawning, sighing, falling into deep wells. Who are you, O my soul? At this point he was startled, for a sunbeam fell from the sky onto his face. O heaven over me, he said, sighing, and sat up. You are looking on, you are listening to my strange soul. When will you drink this drop of dew which has fallen upon all earthly things? When will you drink this strange soul? When will, of eternity, cheerful, dreadful abyss of noon, when will you drink my soul back into yourself? Thus spoke Zarathustra, and he got up from his resting place at the tree, as from a strange drunkenness, and behold, the sun still stood straight over his head. I mentioned in the last video, like, the sun really is at 12, just burning on your head. And he says here, he got up with a sort of drunkenness. Like, if you've ever had a nap that just, you wake up in the middle of the nap and you're so drowsy, you feel the weight and it just pulls you right back into sleep. That's kind of what I'm getting from here. But from this one, mighty justly conclude that Zarathustra had not slept long. So that was the end of the noon, which was way more cryptic. Gotta say, very cryptic. This one is titled The Welcome. It was only late in the afternoon that Zarathustra, after much vain searching and roaming, returned to his cave again. But when he was opposite it, not 20 paces away, that which he now least expected came about. Again he heard the great cry of distress, and amazing, this time it came out from his own cave. But it was a long, drawn-out, manifold, strange cry, and Zarathustra could clearly discern that it was composed of many voices, though if heard from a distance, it might sound like a cry from a single mouth. So remember, he's been hearing a lot of cries of distress, and then he goes and searches to see, what do these people need, what's going on. Then Zarathustra leaped toward his cave, and behold, what a sight awaited him after this sound. For all the men whom he had passed during the day were sitting there together. Remember how he kept directing people to the cave? His cave, now they're there together. The king at the right and the king at the left, remember the two kings? The old magician, the pope, the voluntary beggar, the shadow, the conscientious in spirit, the sad soothsayer, the ass, and the ugliest man had put on a crown, and adored himself with 2 crimson belts. For like all who are ugly, he loved to disguise himself, and pretend that he was beautiful. What? That's an interesting line. Disguising oneself and pretending you're beautiful. Kind of reminds me of wigs, weaves, fake eyelashes. It's sort of a disguise, isn't it? But in the middle of this melancholy party stood Zarathustra's eagle, bristling and restless, for he had been asked too many questions, for which his pride had no answer, and the wise serpent hung around his neck. Remember how I mentioned previously that in Christian iconography, the serpent is satanic, okay? When you analyze an animal, the symbolism of it can take on multiple meanings, okay? Both the positive and negative aspects of the creature. And that the Asian cultures, specifically the Chinese, the serpent is seen as a symbol of wisdom, okay? Their zodiac. So when he says here, the serpent hung around his neck and calls it wise, you can see I was on the right vein. Zarathustra beheld all this with great amazement. Then he examined every one of his guests with friendly curiosity, read their souls, and was amazed again. Meanwhile, all those gathered had risen from their seats and were waiting respectfully for Zarathustra to speak. But Zarathustra spoke thus: "You who despair, you who are strange, so it was your cry of distress that I heard, and now I also know where to find him whom I sought in vain today, the higher man. He sits in my own cave, the higher man. But why should I be amazed? Have I not lured him to myself with honey sacrifices, and the cunning siren calls of my happiness?" Honey sacrifices. That is an interesting phrase. Honey sacrifices. Because when you think of a sacrifice, it's usually painful. When someone tells you, like, well, you need to make this sacrifice, It hurts, doesn't it? You're like, ah, eesh, that's a that's gonna burn a bit. For it to be a sweet sacrifice, that's not something that everyone has felt. Cunning siren calls. Now, sirens, you can think of them in the old folk tales that sailors would say, like a voluptuous mermaid. She would, you know, her breast would be out. She would be calling to the captains who's been the seamen, right? Who have been on the ship for a long time. And then they see this, like, beautiful woman, half fish, half human, in the water with her boobs out, and she's calling to them with a beautiful voice. They're not paying attention, and then they crash into the rocks. That is the siren. Now, many cultures have depicted the siren in different ways. But when he mentions cunning siren calls, there's this sort of deviance there, even though it's with a beautiful voice. It kind of reminds me of modern musicians, female musicians to be exact, because they have, some of them they look really beautiful, they have a nice voice, but what are they calling to? Destruction, sin, hedonism, drugs, greed, vanity, pomposity. Nothing really great for the human soul. But because they're attractive, they get a lot of attention. So, think about it. It seems to me that you are poor company. You, who utter cries of distress, upset each other's hearts, as you sit here together. First someone must come, someone to make you laugh again. A good, happy clown, a dancer, and wind and wild cat, some old fool. What do you think? Forgive me, you who despair, that I speak to you with such little words, unworthy, verily, of such guests. But you do not guess what makes me so prankish. It is you, yourselves, who do it, and the sight of you. Forgive me, for everyone becomes brave when he observes one who despairs. Now this is interesting right here. For everyone becomes brave when he observes one who despairs. Sometimes you can, in your own life, see somebody who is freaking out, and then you realize you have to be the stabilizing force in that situation. I think that's a very common condition, so it's quite witty. Like, think of let's take an example from fiction. You're in a parent is in the zombie apocalypse. The child's scared. The parent is scared, but the parent must put on a strong face in order to soothe the child, right? So when he mentions here, for everyone becomes brave when he observes one who despairs. There's a point there. And think of a soldier movie. There'll be like someone, like, imagine this. So many movies have done this. Soldiers are lined up. The enemy horde is coming. A soldier is next to another soldier, and that soldier urinates on himself, and it drips down the leg into a puddle on the ground. And that soldier looks at that guy, totally terrified, and then he's like, I don't want to be cowardly like that. And then he toughens up, and he's like, let's get ready, let's charge. You see? So, to urinate on yourself is a sign of deep despair. So, you can think of this example that he's given, this phrase here, and then picture how many times you've seen this in your own life, and how many times you've seen this in cinematic episodes. Okay? Very clever of Nietzsche to put that there, because it's true. But that there's also people who they get into panic when others do as well. So let's not forget that. Okay, because panic is contagious. Okay, if some people start running, other people will see those people run and just run because they don't even know what the others are running from. But because everyone's running, panic is contagious, and then the mob mentality comes out, and then there's a stampede, and people get hurt. So it can go the other way as well. To encourage one who despairs, for that every one feels strong enough. Even to me you gave this strength, a good gift, my honored guests, a proper present to ensure hospitality. Well then, do not be angry if I also offer you something of what is mine. This is my realm and my dominion, but whatever is mine shall be yours for this evening and this night. So you can see the constraints here. The constraints here. This night. My realm. Very possessive here. Very territorial as well. My animals shall serve you. My cave shall be your place of rest. In my home and house, nobody shall despair. So like a sanctuary type of feeling. Home is where the heart is. In my region, I protect everybody from his wild animals. And this is the first thing I offer to you. Security. The second thing, however, is my little finger. And once you have that, by all means, take the whole hand. Well, and my heart too. Be welcome here. Welcome, my guests. So hospitality. Okay? Now remember, a proper present to ensure hospitality, he said. So ensuring hospitality. It's not easy to be hospitable, especially if you're introverted, because you have your social battery is a bit less. So this is a very interesting angle here for us. Thus spoke Zarathustra, and he laughed from love and malice. After this, welcomed his guests, bowed again, and were respectfully silent. But the king, at the right hand, answered him in their name, from the manner, O Zarathustra, in which you offered us hand and welcome. We recognized you as Zarathustra. You humbled yourself before us. You almost wounded our reverence. But who would know as you do how to humble himself with such pride that in itself uplifts us? To humble yourself with such pride. It is refreshing for our eyes and hearts merely to see this one thing. We would gladly climb mountains higher than this one. For we came eager to see. We wanted to behold what makes dim eyes bright. And behold, even now we are done with all our cries of distress. Even now our minds and hearts are opened up and delighted. Little is lacking, and our spirits will become sportive. Spirits will become sportive. Now, think about that one for a second. Sport, tit for tat, there's enthusiasm, there's good cheer. The competitive edge is brimming to the surface. It's quite wonderful. When someone doesn't have sportsmanship, they become quite insufferable. They don't know how to be a terror. They don't know how to not be a sore loser. There was a viral video of a woman running a track race. She was losing. She had some baton in her hand, and while she was behind the winner, who was in first place, I believe, she bashed her. You gotta look that up. Track. It was a black woman attacking another black woman. Track star beats racer with baton. Attacks woman with baton. It was very graphic. And then she tried to cry and said it wasn't true. It was really crazy. But that's someone who doesn't have sportsmanship. Doesn't know how to take a loss. When you are sportive and you have great sportsmanship, you learn how to take a loss. And that's really important. You know, that's something that helps people not grow bitter. And in times like this, you know, you really got to watch out for that. Nothing more delightful grows on earth, O Zarathustra, than a lofty, strong will. So what does he say here? Nothing more delightful grows on earth than a lofty, strong will. So, lofty, strong will. That is the earth's most beautiful plant. A whole landscape is refreshed by one such tree. Whoever grows up high like you, O Zarathustra, I compare to the pine, long, silent, hard, alone, of the best and most resilient wood. Pine smells absolutely amazing. Magnificent, and in the end reaching out with strong green branches for his own dominion, questioning wind and weather and whatever else is at home on the heights with forceful questions, and answering yet more forcefully, a commander, triumphant, oh, who would not climb high mountains to see such plants. So the pine tree. Pine tree, pine cones. Pine, when you smell a freshly... when I had guinea pigs, I'd buy pine bedding, and the scent is wonderful. Pine smells great. Pine needle tea, pine cones, they are excellent for putting in the campfire to keep a fire going. I really like pine trees. They are very tough, especially in winter zones. Douglas fir trees are really nice. Blue spruce. Oh, they have such wonderful scents. Your tree here, O Zarathustra, refreshes even the gloomy ones, the failures. Your sight reassures and heals the heart even of the restless. And verily, toward your mountain and tree, many eyes are directed today. A great longing has arisen, and many have learned to ask, who is Zarathustra? And those into whose ears you have once dripped your song when your honey, all of a sudden, the lonesome, the toothsome, have all at once said to their hearts, does Zarathustra still live? Life is no longer worthwhile, all is the same, all is in vain, or we must live with Zarathustra. Why does he not come who has so long announced himself? Ask many, has solitude swallowed him up, or are we perhaps supposed to come to him? Now it happens that solitude itself grows weary and breaks, like a tune that breaks and can no longer hold its dead. So here, solitude itself grows weary. So there's the balance, right? The balance of hibernation. The balance of social interactions versus pensive periods of isolation. Knowing when to break away from the crowd and then knowing when to go back to socializing. Because if you stay too long alone, you become like Tom Hanks on Castaway talking to a ball. Everywhere one sees the resurrected, now the waves are climbing, and climbing around your mountain, O Zarathustra. And however high your height may be, many must come up to you. Your bark shall not be stranded much longer, and that we who were despairing have now come to your cave, and no longer despair. That is but a sign and a symbol that those better than we are on their way to you, that this is what is on its way to you, the last remnant of God among men, that is, all men of great longing, of great nausea, of great disgust, all who do not want to live unless they learn to hope again. So, learning to hope again makes you want to live again. So the relationship of living, hopelessness, despair, This makes me think about when people have extreme doubts and then they start to despair about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or something else. They start to get really dark thoughts. But keeping your faith strong also helps you to remember that you have to have hope in the last day. Hope in Allah's mercy. The assuredness, okay? Very great point for us here. Unless they learn from you, O Zarathustra, the great hope. The great hope. Remember Obama had the phrase hope? He used it for his campaign slogan. Now he was the drone-in-chief. He deported more people than Trump. Last time I looked at the numbers, he was deporter-in-chief, drone-in-chief. So let's not ignore Obama's actual actions. But he used the hope campaign to really get into the minds of the people. And the iconic where he's looking out into the horizon and in the O there's a sunrise. Very occultic symbolism too, by the way. Thus spoke the king at the right, and he seized Zarathustra's hand to kiss it. But Zarathustra resisted his veneration and stepped back, startled, silent, as if he were suddenly fleeing into remote distances. Now I notice here, a king is kissing the hand of Zarathustra. And remember, Zarathustra consistently, this character, he doesn't like flattery, and he actually insults people who flatter him. He doesn't want veneration. But a king does want veneration, and when a king venerates, one can see that as a great honor, can't they? So what has Nietzsche done here for us? He's made a king who's used to veneration venerate someone who doesn't like to be venerated. You know? So that's amazing in and of itself, and then gives you testament of Zarathustra's character and effect on those around him. But also his moral consistency, right? He's not flip-flopping. But after a little while, he was back with his guests again, looking at them with bright, examining eyes. And he said, "My guests, you hired men, let me speak to you in plain and clear German. It was not for you that I waited in these mountains." Plain and clear German? Good God, the king at the left said at this point. In an aside, one can see that he does not know our dear Germans, this wise man from the east. What he means is coarse German. Well, these days, that is not the worst of tastes. You may indeed all be higher men, continued Zarathustra, but for me, you are not high and strong enough. For me, that means for the inexorable in me that is silent, but will not always remain silent. And if you do belong to me, it is not as my right arm. For whoever stands on sick and weak legs himself, as you do, wants consideration above all. So notice this, weak legs, wanting consideration. So that's a tough one right there. I'm weak, so be considerate. Have you not considered others and their weakness? Think about these phrases that would come up in your own life, right? So it's really unique. Whether he knows it or hides it from himself, to my arms and my legs, however, I show no consideration. I show my warriors no consideration. How then could you be fit for my war? So that's interesting. Considering your soldiers, being fit for war. Now, if you don't consider the needs of your soldiers, you can have a mutiny. You know, when it comes to food, that's what we have to consider, and the weight on the soldiers. Remember, there's a fictional example we'll use. When Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones wants to go attack King's Landing, Sansa Stark tells her that the men of Winterfell, the men of the North, are weary and need a break. And Daenerys is like, now that I helped you fight the Night King, the dead, now when it's come time for you to hold up your deal, you don't want to do it. And Sansa's explaining to her, like, basically telling Daenerys to be considerate, that these are your men too, and they're battle weary, they need rest, right? And Daenerys, she's in a pickle because you gotta go attack when it's ripe. But it is also true that the men of the Northerners are going from one battle to the next battle, and they're very tired without having a time to rest, which makes you also think about, well, me at least, the veterans of Gaius Julius Caesar. They were battle strong from Gaul, their conquest of Gaul, but they did have time to rest and recuperate. And seasoned veterans who have recovered their strength have very, like, they're very valuable, right? So there's a balance of how much do you considerate, how far do you go, because if you're going to be a warrior, you're going to suffer either way. But think about in the movie Alexander, the one with Angelina Jolie and Colin Farrell, I think his name is. There's Alexander is about to go fight, and the enemy, I forgot the name in the movie, but the people are forced to fight, and they don't want to be there, and who's Alexander's fighting against, and it's enslaved men versus free men, and the one who enslaved men to fight isn't considering the will of his soldiers and what motivates them, whereas Alexander for a time does. In the film, though, when he starts going further and further chasing his dream to conquer more land, his soldiers are becoming more homesick. They want to go back. He's not considering what is also good for his soldiers, and this is going to cause people to have a mutiny. It's going to cause chaos. So you don't want to over-coddle the soldiers, but you also do have to consider them, alright? And their comfort. If you think of another fictional example, think about when Daenerys Targaryen is with Sir Mormont. She's buying the Unsullied. The dude with the shaved head, he gets his blade and takes off the nipple of one of the Unsullied, and he mentions, like, they'll do whatever you say. Now, he mutilated the soldier to make a point that the soldier, you don't need to consider the soldier. They'll obey because you hold the whip. You need not consider them, because through their suffering, they become more hardened. And remember, Sir Jorah Mormont, he tells Daenerys, oh, you won't command them to do horrible things to children, because remember, the Unsullied, before they become Unsullied, they had to take a newborn babe from its mother's arms and then put it down and then present the slave owner a coin of payment for the baby that they took out. And then the Unsullied would become verified after that, right? And so the Unsullied were trained in a way that makes them obedient, and you need not consider them as much because they will just follow orders. Whereas with free men, they have a choice. And if you don't consider what makes them tick, then you're going to lose them. So there's a balance here. So Nietzsche has given us a very unique sentence that can go so many different routes, and also elicits the different style of training soldiers. Okay? You think of in World War II, the Japanese kamikaze pilots. They would get hawked up on meth, some type of drug, and then they would fly their planes, and then they did Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was on December 7th. The ones who commanded the Japanese to crash into those boats, they didn't consider what the soldier wanted, because the soldier's not going to survive that ordeal. Okay? What the person considered, the general, whoever made the order, whoever invented that stratagem, wasn't thinking considerately of the soldier because the soldier's gonna die. He wasn't maximizing soldier lives, but maximizing damage to the enemy. So what a commander considers, is it goal-oriented towards the main objective, or is it oriented more towards the soldiers, or what the people want, or what the king wants? What is the orientation of consideration? Where is the consideration being put? Lots to think about, okay? With you I should spoil my every victory, and some among you would collapse as soon as they heard the loud roll of my drums. So, drums are a very intimidating instrument, especially if they're really deep. Like, like they can get it does something. And if you have an army approaching, and there's the stupid dumb drums like that's more percussion. It's retarded. It has, but the deeper the drum. I remember watching a Japanese back in the day when I wasn't Muslim and I stopped listening to music. There was these huge barrel drums, and these Japanese guys, they were banging on the drums like in this orientated mass display where all these drums were, and they're banging on these deep bellowing drums, and it just makes your head spin. It like punctures your nervous system because of how intimidating that type of sound is. There's something very primal about it. So when he talks about how some among you would collapse as soon as they heard the loud roll of my drums, don't underestimate that. Today we hear music of killing, of booty shaking. We're desensitized. But the art of making drums and then putting them in your military to stimulate your soldiers' movements, but also to intimidate the enemy, was an actual thing. Okay. Nor are you beautiful and well born enough for me. I need clean, smooth mirrors for my doctrines. On your surface, even my own image is distorted. That's a deep line right there. On your surface, even my own image is distorted. That's deep. Many a burden, many a reminisce press on your shoulders. Many a wicked dwarf crouches in your nooks. There is hidden mob in you too, even though you may be high and of a higher kind. Much in you is crooked and misshapen. Now he's definitely grilling this person. Super grilling them. I mean, talk about getting a Nietzschean insult. You are more... No, sorry, he says here, you are mere bridges. May men higher than you stride over you. Ooh! That's like a very unique way to insult somebody. You are a bridge. May higher men stride over you. SubhanAllah. Nietzsche and Shakespeare, if they had a lyrical battle, it would be epic. They are both alive at the same time. You signify steps. Therefore, do not be angry with him who climbs over you to his height. Ooh. Look at that. You signify steps. Now, think of how people talk about if you want to climb the corporate ladder, you got to step on some necks. This alludes to some people are the footstools of others in a really weird way. A genuine son and perfect heir may yet grow from your seed, even for me, but that is distant. You yourselves are not those to whom my heritage and name belong. It is not for you that I wait in these mountains. It is not with you that I am to go down for the last time. Only as signs have you come to me that those higher than you are even now on their way to me. So, higher people than you are coming to him, he's saying. See that? Not the men of great longing, of great nausea, of great disgust, and that which you call the remnant of God. No, no, 3 times no. It is for others that I wait here in these mountains. I will not lift my feet from here without them. It is for those who are higher, stronger, more triumphant, and more cheerful. Such are the built, perpendicular in body and soul. Laughing lions must come. Laughing lions must come. Think of the combination of someone who's cheerful and triumphant at the same time. Usually we think of someone triumphant as very angry, right? Now, I think a good example of that in fiction would be Robert Baratheon. He was very joyous. He was a drunkard and a womanizer. But he always seemed kind of happy, but he'd have his outbursts, right? In Robert's Rebellion, when he was taking over the Seven Kingdoms and usurping the throne of the Mad King, you know, he did have a jolly disposition about him, and he liked to drink and whore. So he was triumphant over his enemies, but he kept a positive air of festivity. Now, winning and ruling, as Tywin Lannister mentioned, I believe, is not the same thing. So if you're going to be a cheerful fool after you won, and you're not going to govern and be serious, well, you're going to have a problem, right? Because ruling isn't a joke. So it's a very unique combination here. Laughing lions must come. None of us really much think of lions in that way. Oh, my strange guests, have you not heard anything of my children, and that they are on their way to me? Speak to me of my gardens, of my blessed isles, of my new beauty. Why do you not speak to me of that? This present I beseech from your love, that you speak to me of my children. For this I am rich, for this I grew poor. What did I not give? What would I not give to have one thing, these children, this living plantation? These life trees of my will and my highest hope. Now that's a very cool way to call your children. Life trees of will. So children, life trees of my will. We would say the will of Allah, but you do shape part of your kid when you're raising them, how you nurture them, how you water that tree. The fruits, you shall know them by your fruits, is a Christian saying. Fruit tree, there's fruit bushes. We have another saying, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. You know, that's a very common phrase in the English language and American culture. So Nietzsche is not too far off when he's calling children life trees of the parents' will. You know, you have high expectations for your children, then it calls them a living plantation. That's a very wonderful way of thinking about when you see a beautiful, healthy, pruned fruit tree free of pests. It's not crooked. You've put 2 posts on the side of it as a sapling, helped it to grow up straight and beautiful, and in years to come, it provides you with shade and fruit equaling sustenance. Your children, you nurture them when they're a tiny little sprout, then they get to the teenage sapling age, and then when they start to bear fruit, aka economic success, they give you shade, meaning retiring you from the workforce, right? You're no longer under the laborious sun, grinding it out, and then you no longer have to hunt for your daily meal. The children provide you that banquet, the bounty of which they have grown in themselves. So there's a lot of symbolism, metaphor in the lines of Nietzsche that are very poetic and quite beautiful. Thus spoke Zarathustra. See, Nietzsche talks more positively about children than feminists do. Feminists call children a parasite. Yes, they do. I've shared that. A clump of cells. It's only a life if the mother wants it. Late-term abortions. Okay? Very sick individuals. But here, Nietzsche says, living plantation. My highest hope. Notice how a man is talking more positively about the potentials of children than a secular, liberal, atheist, feminist in the American fashion. You know, it's quite interesting. Crotch goblins is another one I've heard feminists say. Crotch goblins. Absolutely cruel to even say such a thing. Thus spoke Zarathustra, and suddenly he stopped in his speech, for a longing came over him, and he closed his eyes and mouth as his heart was moved, and all his guests too fell silent and stood still in dismay. Only the old soothsayer made signs and gestures with his hands. Interesting, why the soothsayer, right? Okay, now the next section is titled The Last Supper. Now, I'm pretty sure that's going to have some digs at Christianity because, as you know, Christians have Jesus in the Last Supper. That has been used in countless musical parodies, and there's a lot to it. So let us dig in to see what is Nietzsche going to say now, because you don't know where he's always going to go when he has a title of a new section. So this should be fun. For it was at this point that the soothsayer interrupted. The welcome pushed forward like one who has no time to lose, seized Zarathustra's hands and shouted, "But Zarathustra, what more thing is more necessary than the other? Thus you say yourself. Well then, one thing is more necessary to me now than anything else. A word at the right time. Did you not invite me to supper? And here are many who have come a long way. Surely you would not feed us a speeches alone. Also, all of you have thought far too much. For my taste of freezing, drowning, suffocating, and other physical distress, but nobody has thought of my distress, namely starving. Food time. Now remember, we dealt with hospitality in the past other readings, right? Hospitality is a lot more than great rhetorical entertainment, but you have to provide something to eat as well. Food does bond people. Thus spoke the soothsayer, but when Zarathustra's animals heard these words, they ran away in fright. Now they saw that whatever they had brought home during the day would not be enough to fill this one soothsayer, including dying of thirst. Continue the soothsayer, although I hear water splashing nearby, like speeches of wisdom that is abundantly and tirelessly. I want wine. Not everybody is a born water drinker like Zarathustra. So notice here, Zarathustra isn't a drunkard. Remember, I made a live stream called "Don't Take Wisdom from an Intoxicated Mind." Okay? I've made a live stream on that. Check it out. Now, what's interesting here, Nietzsche includes something here. The soothsayer wants alcohol. Zarathustra wants water. What nourishes the body really? Water. What dilutes the mind? Alcohol. Right? Someone who feels they have high statements when they're intoxicated is absurd. Even the imbecile Joe Rogan once said that he thought he had all these profound thoughts when he was high on weed. He wrote them down. The next day when he was sober, he looked at them, they made no sense. Okay? A lot of people will trip out, think they're having these epiphanies, these visions, and then when they go to recollect them the next time, they make no sense, and they're these fractured, distorted thoughts, right? And then your mind, you're losing brain cells, you're weakening your muscle power of your brain, your cognitive abilities, fogging up your pineal gland. You are just ruining yourself, but you think because the alcohol makes you feel whirly for a while, that somehow you're getting closer and closer to wisdom, when actually you're getting farther and farther away from it, which is why Islam is brilliant for banning intoxicants. Yes, banning alcohol took time in Islam, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, did sanction a drunkard being beaten. Okay? And so Islam is very clear that you're not supposed to have alcohol. Nor is water fit for the weary and wilted. We deserve wine. That alone gives sudden convalescence and immediate health. So what's the backwardness of what this soothsayer is saying? He's inverted the truth. Wilted. When something's wilted, a plant needs water. You ever had a garden, you water that plant. Like on a hot summer day, you went 2 days without watering your plants. If it's 80 degrees out, you water the plants, they perk up a bit, right? They perk up real nice. Now, wine, after a hard day of stress, can perk some people up, but it's a counterfeit. It's an artificial stimulant. Because the next day, when you're hungover, you're back to level 0. In fact, you're in the negative zone. And your body is depleted and dehydrated. So you didn't really fix anything. And the problems you faced are still there. And all you did was kick the can down the road till the next day. And now the problem is still there. And you didn't process it. You didn't approach it with a sober mind, but a blurred circus of a mind. So it gives you a sudden temporary burst, but the fall is quite high. That's why when you see a junkie and they're coming down from their high, it's very raw. Shivers, shakes, sweating, vomiting, right? So it is not good. When you're weary, your muscles need water. They don't need alcohol. But again, the soothsayer is shenanigans. That's why in Islam, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you go to see a soothsayer, your prayers are invalid for 30 days. It's a sin. You're not supposed to go to them, right? So you're not supposed to trust them. On this occasion, as the soothsayer asked for wine, it happened that the king at the left, the taciturn one, got a word in two. For once for wine, he said, we have taken care. I, together with my brother, the king at the right, we have wine enough, a whole ass load. That's funny. So nothing is lacking but bread. Bread? Countered Zarathustra, and he laughed. Bread is the one thing hermits do not have, but man does not live by bread alone, but also one of the meat of good lambs, of which I have 2. These should be slaughtered quickly and prepared tastily with sage. I love it that way. Nor is there a lack of roots and fruit, good enough even for gourmets and gourmands, nor of nuts and other riddles to be cracked. Thus we shall have a good meal in a short while. But whoever would join in the eating must also help in the preparation, even the kings. So notice that. If you want to eat, you're going to help make it. For at Zarathustra's, even a king may be cook. Now that's a good thing to do, because an equalizer, hierarchy. Now Nietzsche has played with words of the higher man, but a higher moral character, not necessarily economic or social status. That's the fun thing about Nietzsche, right? This suggestion appealed to the hearts of all. Only the voluntary beggar objected to meat and wine and spices. Now listen to this glutton, Zarathustra, he said jokingly. Is that why one goes into caves and high mountain ranges to prepare such meals? Now indeed I understand what he once taught us. Praised be a little poverty. Praised be a little poverty. Let's really dig into that. Why? Why should we praise a little poverty? A little bit of salt, right? A little bit of burning. No pain, no gain. If you don't push yourself, pardon me, to excel a little bit, to have a little bit of discomfort, you're not exactly going to level up. And if you are totally on a, think of the children's story of the princess and the pea. This lady, she needed so many soft, comforting layers in order to not feel a small little pea that was under her bed. She was so used to sleeping on a cloud that even the smallest inconvenience would disturb her rest. Okay? So, remember, the keeping up with the Joneses, the consumerism that America pushes, the evil eye people give to others. Now, it doesn't mean you revel in mediocrity. It doesn't mean that you don't try to excel. What it does mean is that there will be times of deprivation, seasonal, just like you're not going to harvest every fruit year round. Now we can, because we have airplanes and cargo ships and trains and semi-trucks, you name it. But times of plenty and times of deprivation. The economy already does that naturally because of our poor leaders and their shenanigans. But there'll be times where you have lots of stuff and times where you don't, and how you balance that out. But having a little bit of poverty, it's almost like a purging of toxins. It helps strengthen you, helps remind you of your place. Because remember, in Islam, the hadiths that talk about that Allah is going to give you tests and trials, okay? And think about how we fast during Ramadan. Think about how hard it is for someone to go and participate in jihad when it's hot or it's freezing cold or the jungle rains and the mosquitoes, you name it, right? There's gonna be some poverty, some lack of something, and that's gonna toughen you up. So you don't shun at the poverty. Now the arrogant first world modern feminists who are gold diggers, the sprinkles, they really think that they can prevent poverty. They don't appreciate poverty. They call men who have poverty dusties. They overinflate their ego, call themselves goddesses, main character energy. They call you a pick-me-sha if you don't marry a super wealthy man. So they don't praise poverty. They mock poverty, thinking they can will their economic status into existence. And this is their occultism, this is their inverted nature. Okay? So if you are alhamdulillah for everything, all praise be to Allah for the good and the bad, then you're way more positive. You're praising Allah for the poverty and for the wealth. So the Muslim, aka Islamic mindset has more tenacity and steadfastness, I'd argue. And why he wants to abolish beggars, be of good cheer, Zarathustra answered him. As I am, stick to your custom, my excellent friend. Crush your grains. Drink your water. Praise your fare, as long as it makes you happy. I am a law only for my kind. I am no law for all. Now that, ooh-wee, look at that. Makes me think of utilitarianism. Makes me think of law, the judiciary, and the legislative branch in general. Can there be a law for one and a law for all? This is a very interesting paradox here. And Nietzsche is really good. The law for kings. Now, think of the American, all men are equal before the law. We know this isn't true. They tried that, but it isn't true. Okay? You got cash, you got status, you're a CEO, you're in the higher up club, you're getting off scot-free most of the time. You're a petty person of a lower class, the law is overextended to you, and you will have no grace. Because you can't pay your way out. And you don't have connections in all the right places. That's why true justice comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alright? So, this is a very interesting line for us. But whoever belongs with me must have strong bones and light feet, be eager for war and festivals. Now notice here. Light on your feet. Think of Legolas in Rings. He's the archer. If you see him sprint and run, he's light on his feet. He never looks tired. Strong bones, that would be the dwarf guy, Gimli. Because his people, they dig and they mine. And so he's harder now. He's not light on his feet. And Legolas doesn't necessarily have strong bones. So to both have strong bones and be light-footed is intense. You can think of like the Hulk. Check that fictional character. He don't look light on his feet. He's heavy on his feet. All the muscles weigh him down. The elephant is strong bones, not light on his feet. The gazelle, light on its feet, not very strong bones. The cheetah, light on its feet, not as strong bones as a weighted down tiger. But the tiger's paws are soft in a certain way. What I'm getting at here is the anatomy and the metaphor. Eager for war, eager for festivals. This is a very unique one. The tenacity to want to engage in such deadly combat, but also the enthusiasm to be celebratory and joyful and gleeful when needed. That's not easy to have. That duality is not easy. Because usually you get one or the other. The class clown versus the bully. The jargon head who is a missile. Like he's like a chained pit bull ready to maul anyone. Just let him go and he'll go at it. But the happy dumb dog who's always shaking his tail like a labradoodle is not very tenacious. It's always trying to have fun and be spunky and sparky and flopping about. Having the balance of 0 to 100 real quick and also having a good humor is not always easy to achieve. So Nietzsche is putting a really high standard on people here. You know, it's interesting because what your eagerness for war means you got a little bit of a taste for it, right? You're like a wildling. You're like, yeah, I'm ready. Ready when you are. But then the person who is like, hey man, let's just all love each other. Let's have a party. Make love, not war. That person's not exactly the one you're putting in the front lines. You feel me? Not gloomy. No dreamer. As ready for what is most difficult as for his festival. Healthy and wholesome. That's like the dream soldier. Now a dreamer is kind of, I think, the philosopher, kind of like myself. You can kind of sit there, entertain your own brain, and you're just looking at the clouds and the trees and being like, You're not really interested in being the social butterfly, but the hermit dreamer is someone who's more introspective and is fine with their own company and need not depend on others for their self-esteem and validation, right? A dreamer in the war times is not really going to work because they have to be more alert. And, like, for example, I'm more pensive, so I'm not really good at driving because I'll look out the window and I'll be like, I wonder, and I get distracted. And I'm like, oh, I can't deal with this. Being on the freeway, I got all these cars around. I don't like it. It makes me have anxiety. I don't want to drive. And I don't have a driver's license. So I let my husband drive. Other women might not understand that. But if you're the dreamer, you're kind of like, your head is not in it. You gotta know your own self, know thyself. Now, being gloomy, that's like Eeyore, that character, the donkey in Winnie the Pooh. He's the depressed, gloomy character. And so, it's really quite fascinating. So if you have someone who's always gloom and doom, or someone who's a little bit more inclined towards nihilism, they're not going to be as eager for war or eager for festivities, right? And a lot of dreamers are not festivous people. They don't want to skip and dance about like your ballerina. They want to think and hold still and move, or walk and think about life. They don't really want to be your entertainment. Nor do they feel that watching others prance about is a productive use of time. They clock out. I think a lot of people with ADD and ADHD like myself, you are a bit of the dreamer, and a lot of the corporatized schools hate those students and want to drug them with Ritalin and other pharmaceuticals to make you just a good little automaton. Don't think and don't dream, just be dead. And then when those children leave those corporatized, monotonous, dead public schools, they turn to substances like cannabis and other and then psychedelics, and then they think that they're finally free. When in reality, you can still be the dreamer while being sober. You just gotta leave your brain alone and embrace who you are. And with the gloomy person, I remember there was like an emo guy in my philosophy class. He was real, like he wore black every day. He dyed his hair black. He was pasty white, like milk, and he was edgy, and he was a bit cynical and nihilistic and gloomy, gothic, but he was smart, and I enjoyed his company when we would talk about philosophy. And people want to take people like him and put them on SSRIs. They want to put them on drugs. So if you notice something, the dreamer and the gloomy person in modern society are always you must be drugged, you must be changed, right? Because if you're in a military state like America, who's a hegemonic force and a war machine that always wants to go to war with China, wants to go to war with Iran, wants to go to war with Russia, wants to go to war with the cartels of Mexico, was meddling in Iraq, meddling in Afghanistan, meddling in Yemen, like fighting on behalf of is not real. They're always at a perpetual state of war. So the dreamer and the gloomy person are not useful as cannon fodder, meat objects for the war machine. So pharmaceutical people come in and want to drug you up. So Nietzsche mentioning here the optimal soldier, someone of strong bones and light feet, who is healthy and wholesome, but he's always ready for what's most difficult. That's a hard thing to attain. But we can value it all the same, right? Because that's like the perfect soldier, the perfect citizens of what can be achieved. Now, The Art of War by Sun Tzu and other books that deal with stratagem, they all have different theories about what training program will be the best for your soldiers, so that your soldiers outclass other people's soldiers. How can you raise a population, nurse it into one that is the prime fighting force for the conditions of your era? You look at the Mongols, you look at the Romans, you look at Macedonians, okay? You go throughout history and you see that those militaries were perfectly primed for that time period. You look at today, we're going into artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence isn't gloomy, it isn't the dreamer, it's not healthy, it's not wholesome, they're not festivus. They are going to have their own law that won't apply to humans. So when Nietzsche has the line here, I am a law only for my kind, I am no law for all, there will be different laws for robots than there will be for humans. So that's even more cryptic when you really examine that line, when you apply it to today's artificial intelligence. Remember, artificial intelligence didn't exist in the time of Nietzsche. So his phrases can be applied to a modern situation, which means he was onto something very clever. The best belongs to my kind and to me, and when one does not give it to us, we take it. So if you don't give it, we take it. Remember in Game of Thrones, House Greyjoy, we do not sow? What does that mean? Remember when the dad is telling Theon, we do not sow, and he doesn't like Theon for how he's taken on the Winterfell Northerner Stark values, because they're raiders. They take what is ours. Where they say, oh, we take what is ours. Here, what do we see here? Nietzsche has the less lines. Give it to us, or we're gonna take it. So there are empires who have that mindset. Either you do a deal or we invade you. That is a common thing throughout history, sadly, but that's the way the cookie crumbles for some. The best food, the purest sky, the strongest thoughts, the most beautiful women. Thus spoke Zarathustra, but the king at the right retorted, strange, has one ever heard such clever things out of the mouth of a sage? And verily he is the strangest sage who is also clever and no ass. Now notice here, they mean, like, when someone makes an ass of themselves, they've really made a fool of themselves. They took their sauciness a bit too far to where it's now not palatable. It's not being swallowed as much. And you'll hear these phrases like, don't make an ass of yourself, you're being an ass. Like when you're being a bit too scratchy, right? Where you want to drop some truth knowledge on people, but your presentation of it is a bit jarring, or you're not reading your audience and you're not tailoring the subject to who you're speaking, you know? It's really interesting. So being clever is also the degree and context of how you use it, when you use it, all that jazz is important. Because if you just are being clever in a moment that doesn't call for it, you come off as a jackass. And then people don't want you around because you're always a naysayer or a contrarian, or you're insensitive. You gotta know who you're talking to and how to tailor that. You know, you can be salty and witty, but know the person's mental state. You know, read the room, as they say, right? Thus spoke the king at the right, and he was amazed. But the ass commented on his speech with evil intent. Yeah, but this was the beginning of that long drawn-out meal, which the chronicles call the Last Supper, and in the course of it, nothing else was discussed but the higher man. Okay, nothing else was discussed but the higher man. So a little bit of a play here going on for us. Last Supper, Christianity, higher man, Jesus. So Nietzsche's changing what we're thinking of when it comes to Christianity, okay? So it's really something to think about here. We'll pause here and save on the higher man for next time. That'll be part 80. But he has dropped bars for us, okay? Really unique phrases. Enjoyable, palatable. I mean, subhanallah, you really can't beat how he goes about what he does, you know? I like that. And, oh, I didn't see some of the comments here. Shug says, Assalamu alaikum. We have an expression in Arabic, the cub is like the male lion. Oh, mashallah. Shug says, sycophancy is definitely an issue when people love on you too much. You have to wonder, where is the knife being hidden? Yes, sycophants. That's so true. Assalamu alaikum, Khalid. Assalamu alaikum, hope you're doing well too. Local Lico, do you like Game of Thrones? Yes, I do. If they edited out all the raunchy scenes, it'd be much better. TT, assalamu alaikum from Afghanistan. How you doing? Say no to racism. Assalamu alaikum. Sam, would you be willing to go head to head in a debate? I think that's a bot, so I'm going to delete that because there's somebody who keeps spamming. No, it's not working. Okay. Let me see. Because I keep getting spammed with those bots by random people just asking for debates, but they got like no subscribers, they got no uploads, and it's just the same thing over and over. and a lot of them will just be sock accounts, and you're like, what? So I'm gonna went ahead and delete that. And you delete one, and they pop up the next day with the same pattern. So it's very strange. Because they never say who they are, they never reply, and then they never say what it is the subject they want to debate. And it's like, what benefit would I get just arguing consistently, like forever, with someone who is, I don't even know where they're coming from? It'd be really quite strange. So anyways, think about some of the things Nietzsche talked about. And that's weird, because I had the live chat, I pressed the button, but it didn't alert me to anyone's things popping up until I had to press again and show. So forgive me if I didn't respond at first to what people wrote, because I was wondering why is the chat so quiet, but then it didn't really show. Now, some things to think about. He talked about, I show my warriors no consideration, okay? Called children the highest hope, life trees of his will, living plantation, being laughing lions must come. You are mere bridges. May men higher than you stride over you. You signify steps. Therefore, do not be angry with him who climbs over you to his height. So, don't complain when others exceed you, when others excel past you. Right? Fascinating. Absolutely great book. I really enjoyed it thus far. And please like, comment, subscribe, join the blog. I post a lot of different things on there, from cooking terminology to rebuttals to motherhood stuff, memes, social commentary, anti-red pill stuff, very just, hadiths, you name it, all kinds of fun things. So go ahead and join that. And it's $5 a month. Really supports the channel. I don't have, major sponsors or something like that. I help the Furqan Foundation with their Qurans, which is small, and it's not like I'm monetized. I'm not monetized. I don't have super chats and things like that. And I'm not part of some larger organization or anything like that. So if you want to support the channel, that would be how you do it, and you get a lot for your buck. Because I have tons of posts on there, and I really think it's important to support what you love. Okay? So take care. I'm going to get lunch started, because my husband and the children are going to be back soon from their MMA classes. So I need to have food ready. So take care. Until next time. Goodbye.